Hello and welcome to Global Sanctuary for Elephants podcast, Global Rumblings. Global Sanctuary for Elephants, or GSE for short, is a non-profit organization with a mission to create vast safe spaces for captive elephants where they are able to heal physically and emotionally, often from very traumatic pasts. I'm your host, Nadia Mari, and I'll be taking you to the lush jungle of the Mato Grosso region in central Brazil, home of GSE's initial project, Elephant Sanctuary Brazil. Currently home to 5 female Asian elephants, lovingly referred to as the girls. Hi everyone, welcome back and thank you for joining us again this week for a new episode of Global Rumblings. We actually have cause for celebration because today is our 40th episode. So let's head over to Brazil to say hi to Kat and Scott. Hi you two.
Hello.
Hey Nadia, feliz aniversario.
Yes, happy anniversary to us. Well, happy 40th episode to us. How's the cold spell in Brazil? Has it left?
Oh, it left very fast. It was here for a couple of days and it quickly disappeared, and we're now to our normal winter temperatures, which are quite toasty warm, very dry, cool nights, but hot days.
Okay. Hot. Well, it's very, very humid here today. So, but we mustn't talk too much about weather because otherwise Bob will cut it out. And also John will comment on YouTube. Stop talking about the weather. Talk about elephants. So last episode, we did a detour. We talked about Bujamina's recovery journey, but also talked about the recovery journeys of the other elephants. And today we'll finish up on Bambi's story. So we left off with her arriving at the sanctuary, taking a dust bath, discovering the yard the next day. So it would be great if you could maybe take us on her journey of the first few months, how she became part of the Powerpuff Girls, her journey during the last few years at the sanctuary.
Sure. I say sure, but I don't remember the first few weeks. I remember the relationships that developed, but I don't remember exactly what that sequence was.
One of the things I remember is that the first time we took her into yard 5, we opened up for her so she could go, and we took the 4-wheeler in to try to encourage her into yard 5. Of course, we're at a distance, and she came half running over into yard 5, and we were so surprised with how quick she moves, considering how she looked when she was at the zoo.
Yeah, I actually recall you coming back and saying, this is a different speed than we're used to right now. She's very quick, but it was even different than Maia's speed. Yeah. Maia can go fast, but Maia would kind of ebb and flow between that. And Bambi seemed like she was just full on, let's go.
Yeah, after I remember at one point feeding them, they were in separate yards. One was in 4, one was in 5, but they were on opposite sides of the same fence line. And going down the fence line to see who actually was the faster elephant when it came to feeding for dinner. I don't remember who it is, but it was amusing because neither was very slow.
Do you remember the first interactions?
I remember from videos that we had Bambi in stall 1 and Hannah and Mara came into stall 2. And we joked that it was really boring because, of course, with Mara and Hannah before that, it was very loud and very animated. And then with them, it was just quiet rumbles from Hannah, and them touching her through the gate. And it was pretty subdued, considering.
And I think when we opened up the gate also, it was really chill.
Yeah.
And I checked some videos and saw that she was rescued in September 2020, and already in November 2020 you were posting videos of Mara and Hannah and Bambi having rumble and trumpet parties at the fence line. So obviously it does sound like they became a little herd quite fast, and also they formed the Powerpuff Girls. So who coined that phrase?
Oh, that's my
or that name. That's a great name.
I used to watch the cartoon. It was one of those 2:00 in the morning, can't sleep cartoons that were on. And my sister also loved it. So it was an easy reference because the difference in the personalities of all 3 elephants kind of matched up a little bit with the 3 Powerpuff Girls from the cartoons. So, they were initially it was a little quiet. And then once like Bambi got comfortable, she was actually the most vocal of them. You know, she would do her big roaring rumbles and head shakes and the whole thing when the three of them were together. And she definitely had the most energy out of the three when it came to interactions.
Yeah, I don't remember if we talked about it in previous episodes regarding Mara, but Bambi definitely attached herself to Mara.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
for a long time, it was Mara's friends with Bambi and Mara's friends with Hana, but Hana and Bambi weren't always great together. It's not like they were frustrated or aggressive, but they just weren't super close.
No.
It revolved around each of their friendship with Mara. And it took some time for that to shift. They would have parties together, but you could see a difference between the relations.
Yeah, I think for Bambi, there was no other elephant on this property except for Mara for a while.
Oh, how sweet.
Yeah, until Mara decided she didn't want that. And then it was really not so sweet.
But she became very protective of Mara. That's when Mara wasn't well also. And she became very much Mara's guardian. And that was really interesting too, because it's the first time we saw Maia run away from anybody. Maia had always been, I think we talked about this before, but Maia had always been a little bit more forward, a little bit sometimes disrespectful of the space of others, and she'd come in and displace the others a little bit with her big.
Mean, she's big physically, but she's also big like energetically. I mean, she's the elephant that most people are intimidated by, which is kind of funny because she's so good and she's so easy and she's so food motivated, but she just has really, really big energy. And
it's a very strong energy, not necessarily like demonstrative strong, but it's just really strong. It's very powerful.
Yeah.
So she removed herself. So Maia removed herself from the group when Mara became ill, and Bambi stepped in. Is that correct?
Actually,
did I understand that?
No. It's actually Maia had for that whole time. Maia would go back and forth. She'd interact with everybody for a day, and then she'd go off on her own. She'd come back for a couple of days. But one time she was on her way back to the threesome, and Bambi was there. And it's like something had happened between Maia and Bambi because Maia ran away. Like tail tucked between her legs, running all the way back to the barn and into yard 5.
And we were there watching. Bambi did, like physically contact anything like that. She didn't do anything. So we're not sure what communication that we can't hear went on or, what happened. But
there was no indication of any sort of conflict, at night. There's nothing like that happened. So we don't know exactly. Again, the only thing we can think of is Bambi at that point was very protective. And maybe just that very protective energy was a little intimidating. And Maia didn't expect it, caught her off guard. Maia wasn't ready for it, but Maia ran away. And she stayed away from them for some time.
Yeah.
She would come back around behind them sometimes and come up relatively close, but she would never engage for a number of months. She wouldn't really engage unless she saw like Hana was on her own a little bit and Maia and Bambi were together. Then she'd have a little bit of interaction with Hana. But then if Bambi started coming that way, Maia would just walk away. And Maia never ran away again. That was the only time I saw her run away. But it was very, very strange, especially given,
And was Bambi was Bambi an elephant that liked to explore a lot? We talked about when Ramba arrived, how you said that she'd looked at every nook and cranny in the sanctuary and looked at every stone and everything, the whole sanctuary. So was Bambi like that as well, or was she quite happy just to be with Mara and then Hana in their little Powerpuff Girl trio and just to be with them, or did she go off on her own?
I think it was all about the friendship. That was the driving force, that social opportunity, that social interaction. And it was pretty powerful for all of them. I mean, she opened up so much, and she's actually the first one that came along that we actually didn't start doing much with her right away. Normally when they first come, we start having some interaction so we can start working on training and things of this nature. For 2 reasons, we didn't really do that. One, our energy was focused on Mara because Mara wasn't well at the time, but also that when we had that opportunity, a lot of times their friendship was overriding all of that.
Especially because of what happened with her and Mason and how insecure she was around Mason. And since she seemed to clearly want to bond with another elephant and interact, we allowed that to happen instead this way, that kind of putting her emotional well-being before her physical well-being. The big concern with her was how thin she was, but we saw very quickly that, with proper diet and everything that Sanctuary offers, she started putting on weight pretty much right away. So although we had concerns about kidney issues and other things, we were encouraged immediately by the weight gain. So we kind of prioritized her
That's so cool.
friendship.
Mhm. Yeah, and it was pretty brilliant. With that friendship, it was pretty much at any given moment when you walk up, there's a Trump party. Any excuse for a party, day or night. And that's when we started having those giant rumbles in the valley at night.
Mhm.
Bambi's
Yeah.
rumbles were huge. I mean, just big, bellowing, deep rumbles, and
Oh.
normally followed by Mara squeaks. But
Yeah, we didn't call them the Powerpuff Girls at first because it wasn't that long before Mara decided she didn't want Bambi around anymore. We had gone and done 10 o'clock feed at night, and they were in yard 3 together. It was raining. They were in the bushes. Everybody was happy, soft, engaging. And then we came in the morning, and Bambi was at the top of yard 3 in the corner by herself, and the other 2 were in yard 2. And we were like, okay, I guess something happened.
Mm.
And there were no signs of anything significant except for Bambi looked like she had put herself in the corner. She's facing out. It's not like she's facing into something, and we started to kind of interact with them that morning and see how that all seemed to play out. And it became pretty clear quickly that Mara was not 100% pleased with Bambi at that point. And we weren't sure if it was just a small thing or if it was going to end up being something more. But it was a little bit that she did not want Bambi anywhere around her after that night.
Do you remember how long that was then? How long had Bambi then been at the sanctuary before the first rift between their trio came? Do you remember? 2 years or?
Oh, the first time? No, it was like maybe a couple of months.
yeah, but
okay.
we also attributed some of that to Mara not feeling well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's why initially when we showed up, we're like, maybe Mara's just being cranky because she doesn't feel well. And Bambi took it really personally because she did seem to be incredibly sensitive. But Mara quickly showed that, no, she didn't want Bambi anywhere near her. So they ended up being separated for a while. Bambi would be in yard 5. And it was kind of similar to Hana, how when she tried to be Maia and Gita's best friend and they kind of pushed her away, how she kind of explored yard 5 while the other 2 were in yard 4. And you feel a little bit bad, but at the same time, the sanctuary is still really new. So they're still really excited about everything that the sanctuary offers and, exploring and finding new things and new smells. So it's not that bad. And then the other thing with that was we would let Hana over to spend time with Bambi during that time, and just leave Mara by herself since she didn't feel well anyway, do her treatments and all that sort of stuff. And that's when Hana and Bambi started being better friends.
Oh, I see. Okay.
There have always been a lot of changes in the dynamic with Mara and Bambi. Sometimes super, super, super close, incredibly affectionate, and then there was a cycle. This was a couple years later where in the morning, Bambi is staying completely away from Mara. Mara actually was, I'm going to say chasing, not really chasing because Mara is slow and Bambi's really fast. But Mara would be pursuing a little bit. Bambi would run away. And then at the end of the day, they're having a big old party at the fence together and everything's great. And all night long, there's trumpets and parties and rumbles and all kinds of soft and wonderful things. And then first thing in the morning, when you go down to feed, they're separated again. And Mara's, looking in Bambi's direction and not focused on her food, focusing on Bambi. And Bambi would just stay away. And at the end of the day, it was back to being a party again. It was really interesting dynamic between them. And so throughout all of this, Bambi always wanted to be with Mara.
Mhm.
She always wanted to go back. She always wanted to be by Mara's side. And it was a little bit tough, I think, sometimes similar to what Kat just mentioned with Hana and Maia and Gita, of pursuing too much, wanting too much, wanting more than Mara could give maybe.
But Hana was really good with her. Hana would stay in the yard and they would be like head to head facing each other for like an hour, not doing anything. They're both awake. clearly communicating something to each other that we have no idea what it is and can't hear, nor could we understand anyway. And they would have these elephant conversations, and then sometimes they would get playful with each other. And sometimes you could see Bambi was pushing buttons a little bit to see where Hana's limits were with that sort of thing. But they ended up doing really well together. And then after Mara seemed not as much in a cranky place, and Hana and Bambi were in a good place, we ended up putting them all back together again in one of the big yards. And you could tell Bambi approached things differently, because initially, like, there was no read the room at all in Bambi. It was always, I am so happy to see you. I am coming over, super energetic. And that's just how it is. But after she ended up coming back in with them, when she would approach Mara, she would actually pause and read the vibe and see, is today a good day? Is today an okay day? Not so good a day? And there was nothing that was going on. They weren't fighting with each other or anything like that. It was just more of, she clearly had a realization that she had to adjust herself sometimes for the other elephants. But that's part of everybody's growth after either having really unhealthy relationships or being by themselves for 50 years. There's a lot to learn.
No, we've talked about it before, that opportunity for growth, the opportunity to help each other, the opportunity for self-exploration when you don't have what you want sometimes, wanting a relationship that you're not ready for or they're not ready for, whoever it is, whichever side. These are all opportunities that we go through on a near regular basis in our social lives, sometimes closer to somebody than others. And, for them, it's many times, as we talked about, the first time they have any sort of social interaction or freedom to actually explore proper social interaction in basically their whole life. 4 or 5 decades alone, or when you're not alone, you're in a tiny little yard or you're on chains next to somebody, and to have the autonomy to explore that relationship as they're exploring life and exploring, that the rediscovery of who they are, that it's just, there's so much that's going on. It's not just the relationship. There's a lot of elements that all tie in. It goes back to the beauty and complexity of what Sanctuary offers.
So then when they were back together again, when you put them back together, is that then when they formed, or then you named them the Powerpuff Girls?
Yeah, it was after a little while, once they became tighter, because initially it was definitely Bambi feeling things out and Mara still feeling things out essentially on her end as well. And then that progressed and they got closer. And then it was at that point that somewhere along the line they became the Powerpuff Girls, because at that point Maia was still, again, somewhat keeping a distance. I think after the three of them kind of bonded again and all of that settled down is when Maia started showing up again. And it was one of the first times we saw her spend time with just Bambi at the back by Lollipop Tree, and people ask all the time, what happens if there's an elephant fight, blah, blah, blah. And we talk about, you're always trying to prevent that. You're looking at the behaviors before things happen, trying not to, you can't stop everything, but you can control to some level what happens before if you can recognize things early. So it's, interactions like that when it's two elephants that haven't been close and something happened between them mentally that they were never close. And they end up at the back of the yard head to head looking at each other. And you're like, okay, is this going to be a happy thing or is this not going to be a happy thing? But they were actually great with each other.
They were awesome with each other. And really, Maya started opening up on a new level. And it was just, we talked about it with, I don't know if we talked about the Gijim and Pocha's arrival, or Maya's growth before Gijim and Pocha's arrival. But that time frame, it was a little while between Bambi's arrival and the next two. And we've seen this before where it seems almost like it was just the perfect amount of time.
Yeah.
Because Maia grew enough and Maia opened up again to the others. And we went through a cycle where all four of those elephants were close together almost every day. And they were all spending time individually with Maia. Sometimes Mara and Maia, sometimes Hana Maia, sometimes Bambi Maia, sometimes all four close together. And it just seemed like that was all evolving really at an ideal time in preparation for the next two.
Yeah, although sometimes we get a little impatient with wanting to bring elephants to Sanctuary because generally they're in terrible situations. we have found on more than one occasion when you look back that if somebody had come earlier, it possibly wouldn't have allowed for a growth that happened during that time period for another elephant.
An opportunity.
Yeah.
Mm. In our last podcast, we talked about the individual recovery journey of Guijamina, but also of all your elephants so far. And I think we're now at a point that it's all connected, because you just talked about Bambi, Mara and Hana being the Powerpuff Girls coming together, then Maia changing, opening up after Gita had died, because there was then again another change, because Mara, I think, initially then pushed Bambi away for the second time, but Maia had come further on her recovery journey and then embraced Bambi, who'd been, I'll say, kicked out of the trio. So can you take us there then as well?
There's actually a lot that happened in there also, because you had, poaching Guijamina coming, which was interesting for everybody.
Because it was the first time we saw Bambi was the first one to go over at the fence line to be excited and say hi, which was a little bit of a surprise with what we had seen from her, but it was really nice.
It was beautiful. And then sometimes we had all 7 of those elephants close by. 7? 3, 4, 6 elephants close by. I had an extra elephant there. 6 elephants close by, all, by the pond or all at dinner time. It was really fascinating to see all that dynamic. And, then you had the interesting element of Pocha helping Giza open up a little bit, but not so much, because Pocha pulling back, which we can get into with their arrivals. But there's a whole lot that happened in all of that. And then with Pocha's passing, and then Giza and Giza's dynamic, and how Maia and Bambi have taken Giza on as their little,
I was waiting for the word.
Funky teenager.
Their student, and how they're helping her grow and evolve and understand what is right and what is wrong, but also giving her the space to be an elephant, and her the space to be a young elephant, and having some tolerance, some patience. There's so much that went into all of that. And then more recently, we saw that Mara was more serious about just not letting Bambi come close and pushing Bambi to the side. And again, some of that we didn't see what was going on. No serious indication of something happened, but Bambi was really on edge sometimes. And sometimes they would just stare at each other.
And we also think part of that insecurity is exacerbated by the fact that, she's losing sight in her other eye. She arrived with a cataract in her left eye already. She had minimal vision, but she could see out of her right eye, but she had a cataract in her right eye that's been developing over years and now is significantly compromised in her overall vision. And we think that it may be very similar to what happened the first time, but because of Bambi not being able to see and being much more compromised that way, that she has a different level of insecurity with those dynamics now.
And her vision is decreasing. I wouldn't say dramatically, but it's notable. During the day now, she doesn't wander around as much. At night, she goes off right away. But during the day, she's much more, she stays closer to the fences in smaller areas. She tries to stay close to Maia, but sometimes Maia wanders off a little bit, and Maia can be just a few meters away, but Bambi doesn't really locate her well. And that goes back to the training of what it means to be an elephant in captivity, and the senses that they end up not relying on. The distance communication is not something they have with other elephants, even close communication with an elephant, and relying on the rumbles and relying on other modes of communication versus just her sight.
Maia's always been really good with it, but I mean, for me, she may be the only one who seems to be really good with it. And it was the same thing in Tennessee. We would see elephants lose each other that were on opposite sides of the barn outside, and they would head off in completely different directions. And it's like, she's right there. Can't you hear her? Are you not listening? I mean, it's surprising.
In Tennessee, we had where they'd be calling each other, and they're both big, giant calls. I mean, clearly you can hear each other, and they're both going in different directions as they're calling each other. It's almost like they can't differentiate. They haven't been trained to differentiate where that sound is coming from. So you see sometimes Bambi gets a little insecure. Maia's right behind her. Where are you, Maia? Maia doesn't respond, or doesn't respond in a way that Bambi understands, and then Bambi goes back to the fence. So we see these increased insecurities. That said, what an enormous gift for her to have Maia even if she does
Yeah.
leaves her sometimes, Maya has been absolutely exceptional with standing by her side and really nurturing, Bambi through this process.
And that whole thing was really strange. I mean, it was one night that Bambi went off on her own, and she just, like, she didn't just go a little bit away. She went far away from Mara and Hannah. She was by herself off in this little corner. And then by the next morning, she ended up at the back of 5, and Maya ended up coming into that area, but they were still quiet. And Maya was being respectful of Bambi's treatment and stuff. And then what was it, the next morning that at breakfast when you went out to take care of them, Maya did one of her Isn't Life Wonderful good morning parties that she used to do pretty much on a daily basis with Gita. And we were all so pathetic. It was like
amazing.
Teary-eyed and cryy all day because she's been in a good place, but it's a sound. Their trumpets are all very individual. And even up at the house, it was a sound that, the second I heard it, I was like, I miss that sound. And it was very much a very, very happy Maia trumpet. And
then the squeaks.
Yes.
That's when she started doing the
raspberries.
A lot of raspberry squeaks that she used to do only with Gita. She hadn't done since Gita. And to watch that come out, and then also watch how Bambi responded to that.
Because initially Bambi the first day was still quiet about it. Mm-hmm. She was like, okay. But then the second day.
Yeah, it was so beautiful to watch for both of them, and for her to be there in that moment, for Maya to be there in that moment, and just truly exceptional.
And it is that weird dynamic of, not to circle back to Mason, but when people talk about how could you bring her there, you don't know what that's going to do to Bambi. And it's like Bambi and Maya did not have a good relationship initially. Mm-hmm. I mean, they weren't brawling or fighting or anything, but, Maya was not comfortable around her and they weren't friends. And they're now closer to each other than everybody else is.
I think it's actually Maya is substantially more nurturing towards Bambi than Hannah and Mara ever were.
Sure.
That doesn't mean they didn't have a beautiful relationship, but I think as far as Bambi being nurtured and tended to and looked after, I think that Maya has offered that in a way that no one else has.
Yeah, I think for Maya, Bambi is a little center of the universe right now versus when Bambi was with Hannah and Mara. Hannah's first relationship is still Mara. Mara's first priority relationship is still Hannah. And they were friends with Bambi, but it wasn't the same. And I think Maya is all about Bambi at this point. Whatever she needs, whatever she wants, she is there for her. And I think that's a first for Bambi. And I think it's
sweet.
Beautiful for both of them.
And any excuse for a party.
Any excuse.
Maya kicks off at all times. And actually, Geisha started instigating it the other day, which was cool to see. But yeah, it's just really amazing to see all that has evolved and all that she's been through and all the opportunities that have been created for her.
We're running out of time, so I'd like to close and circle back to Bambi's vision because supporters might have the same question that I had, but I was lucky that you answered my question when I was with you, so maybe you can share the answer with listeners. Bambi's got a cataract. That's a condition that humans have as well. So why can't you treat it?
We treat it the way we can. So she gets drops and different supplements to try to slow the progression. But the main way you actually treat it in humans is surgically, and she is not remotely a surgical candidate. It's only been done a handful of times in elephants to begin with. But because of her age and because of her being on the thin side and still, we've done blood work and all of that looks good, but there's must be some underlying something that we're not able to figure out what it is. So on top of her age and her weight and the fact that she probably has something going on, she's a huge sedation risk. So there's just no way that we can do that with her.
So my question wasn't quite correct. I said, why aren't you treating it? Of course, you are treating it the way you can. Why can't you treat it in the way that we would treat human cataracts? As you said, surgery. So surgery just can't be done on an elephant. I presume, as you said, you just can't do it one-to-one. So unfortunately, it's gradual, but it is something that is progressive.
Yeah, but there are a lot of more than you would think blind elephants in captivities in different sanctuaries, especially in Asia, usually,
Yeah.
unfortunately, through abuse and dominance. And they do really well, but it is an adjustment, just like it would be for a human who suddenly lost their sight. You know, there's so much to get used to. There's so much adjusting. There is not just your comfort with your limitations, but also figuring out how to use your other senses more. And there's so much to it. And she's doing really well, but yeah, it would be an adjustment for anybody, even if, you know, for humans, they can understand it and they can have an explanation of medically what's going on and know what's coming next and, you know, a timeline for progression and all of that information and still be really uncomfortable with it. But she doesn't have any of that. All she knows is that slowly she's losing her sight. So she's doing really, really well.
Absolutely.
Oh, and she's got Maia by her side, which is lovely to hear.
And Gijamina poking her.
No, but it's been awesome to see. And I mentioned it briefly, you know, the other day, you know, Maia and Gija were there. Sorry. Maia and Bambi were sitting there, and Gija came over and just struck up a huge party. And she's becoming, I wouldn't necessarily call them the threesome at this point, but she's intimately involved with them on a daily basis, and doing really exceptionally well.
Yeah, because her relationship with them has always been separate. I think having that all together is also different and needs adjusting to. But
there was a video posted not too long ago of Maia and Gija playing in the pond. And then just today, and we didn't get it on video, but we had Gija and Bambi playing in the mud wallow. Yeah. Pushing on each other and just trunk to trunk. And then Gija putting her butt in Bambi's face and harassing her a little bit while Bambi was squishing her butt in the mud and having a great time. So it was really nice to see.
Gija's key move, but in the face.
Yeah.
But okay, well that's a fun note to end on. Giji's key move. So I'll let you go. Thanks for your time. Just before we do say goodbye, how are the little owls doing?
They are doing quite well. The little fluff nuggets they're actually still at our house because it's the quietest place that we have here, in crates. And their little downy fuzz is all over everything.
A house full of owl tumbleweed.
But they're doing really, really well. One of them, who was actually the one that was in captivity the longest before she came to us, isn't that great. She has some deformation of her wings, which is not uncommon when you have improper diet with feeding wildlife and feeding owls, which is really unfortunate because I don't think she's ever going to be able to fly. It's pretty substantial deformation. So that part is always tough.
This is why people aren't supposed to just take in wild animals and want to raise them on their own because they see it on social media and they think they can do it. Yeah. She was eating well, but she wasn't getting anything with bones. So she has a very low calcium and it makes it so that when they're that young and their bones are growing, that they don't grow properly. And you can't fix that once you get past a certain point. So
just because a wild animal is eating doesn't mean you're doing right by it. No, you know, you've got to put these animals in a place where they can get proper care, find specialists, and give them to people that know, because ultimately her life is
questionable at this point.
Yeah. What's going to happen? How is she going to recover? Yeah. And if she does survive through it, is she ever going to be able to fly, or is she going to be stricken to captivity because of what has been done? So
we went from a really cute, funny note to a slightly depressing one, but the others are really good.
The others are adorable.
Well, I'm happy. It's good to hear that they're with you. So yes, it's a bit depressing, but
we are trying.
You're trying, and they're in the best place possible. So fingers crossed. So have a great rest of your afternoon. Have fun feeding the little feather nuggets and sweeping out your tumbleweed, your feathery tumbleweed.
Oh, you can't sweep it. It just blows everywhere. It's a losing battle.
Okay. Well, then have a great rest of your day, and then we'll catch up again in 2 weeks' time for our recording. Until then, take care.
Thank you, Nadia. Take care too.
Bye, Nadia.
Bye.
Bye.
That's all that we have time for this week. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. And if you did, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode. Another great zero-cost way to support us is by leaving a 5-star rating or a glowing review, as this helps other people discover the podcast. Thank you so much, and until we meet up in 2 weeks' time, take care.